Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, and welcome to more Peter Hammill videos. So for this installment, I'll be talking about Sitting Targets, released in 1981. Now I should say, my original intention for this video was to have a whole video on the K group, so I would have talked about this album, Enter K, Patience, and The Margin. But I thought about it, and seeing as how Sitting Targets is really more of a precursor to the K group, and the fact that this is a very special album in and of itself, I felt it more appropriate to just do one episode just talking about this album. So, yeah, like I said, it was released in 1981, just after A Black Box, and if you saw my previous video, you'll know that A Black Box is one of my all-time favorite Peter Hammill albums. It's a very extreme album, and it's, you know, A Black Box has, it shows him pushing everything to the absolute limits. We see, like, the sidelong epic with Flight, we see some wild experimental tracks, like The Jargon King, or The Wipe, and stuff like that. So by the time we get to Sitting Targets, we can see him kind of, you know, reining things in and simplifying things to a certain degree, at least in terms of the songs and the arrangements. And it is, in essence, you know, another collection of lighter songs. So this could be seen as a cousin to Fool's Mate or Nadir's Big Chance. But lighter songs or not, this is a very, very, very good album. You know, I think of all of Peter Hammill's solo albums, this one has the highest concentration of songs that are still performed regularly in a live format. So there's a lot of longevity with this album, I think, and it's just a great collection of really good songs. I would argue that some of his very best songs can be found on this album. So there's definitely been some changes. This is, you know, in essence, a solo album with band elements. So the previous few solo albums, Future Now, Page 7, A Black Box, they are, you know, in essence, solo albums with, you know, little contributions here and there from other musicians to kind of add color and flavor. And while this is, like I said, it is in essence a solo album as well, there's much more contributors involved here. Notably, we have Guy Evans on drums. The last couple of albums we see Peter Hammill playing the drums himself, and while he is definitely not a drummer per se, there is a certain charm to his performances on A Black Box and PH7. But I think having Guy Evans come in to do the drums on some of these tracks really helps to you know, tighten up the arrangements a fair bit, and I think it ultimately leads to a better production quality as well. I think I said in the previous video, A Black Box, while it is one of my favorite albums, has almost like a garage tone to it. This sounds a little bit more professional. Other contributors, we have, of course, David Jackson, throwing some saxophone and flute into the mix here and there. A synthesizer player by the name of Phil Harrison, I believe. Let me just double check his handwritten liner notes. Yes, Phil Harrison does some synthesizers on at least one track, a couple of tracks, I think. And we also have, interestingly, Morra's Pert playing some auxiliary percussion on here as well. He was, of course, the percussionist for Brand X. And Hammill would have known, he did a tour with Brand X in the late 70s, which is kind of a bizarre thing to think about, but I'm sure that's where that connection came about. So yeah, there's many more contributors, and I think that's what leads to more of a band sound. And you can kind of hear where Hammill, the direction that Hammill was going in the demise of Van der Graaf in '78. You know, there's obviously some really experimental tracks along PH7, Future Now, that kind of stuff. But he is slowly working his way into, you know, a raw rock sound, which would be fully realized by the time we get to the K group, which I'll talk about in the next video. And you could call it a raw rock sound. I mean, some people say it's kind of like a new wave sort of a thing, or, you know, they'd say post-punk. But it is more of a, you know, a simplified rock sound, miles away from what Van der Graaf Generator was doing. So again, that's good. You see him progressing. You see him, you know, exploring the new, which is kind of what he's always done. It's a great album cover as well. I love I quite like the Crash Test Dummies before and after the impending doom, which is quite cool, nice to look at. For the previous album cover, A Black Box, is not a great album cover. It's literally just black with some handwriting on it. Although there's merit to that in itself as well, I guess. So anyway, like I said, there's a very high concentration of very, very, very good songs on here. So let us break down the tracks. So the album opens with Breakthrough. Now this is a fantastic piece. Right away we hear a difference in the production, those sort of jarring piano chords that enter the stereo space, and they just fade out slowly in that kind of lazy bass line. We're not really sure where the song's going until Guy Evans' drums fade in. I love how the drums fade in. We get that kind of chilled out shuffle. Something totally new for Hammill, for sure. And it's a great song, very kind of oppressive and ominous, and again, the sense of impending doom comes along with this track. But it's not a big, long thing or anything. I mean, it is essentially a pop song, but there's a great contrast to it as well. I love how when we get to the chorus, we have more of a straight-ahead, rock sound, and then the verses have the more lazy kind of sounding shuffle vibe, which is really, really cool. Lyrically, I think it has to do with there's like burglars breaking into a school or something like that. I don't know. I might be way off base, so you can correct me in the comments. But I always say I'm not a big fan of trying to analyze the lyrics because I'm not qualified to do so. But the ominous sound of the song certainly contributes to what that might be. Anyway, rambling on here. Track 2 is My Experience, and this is the first song that's kind of, I guess, typical of the album, if you like, and that it is that raw, post-punk, new wave sort of a sound. I love the intro. I love the acoustic guitar intro, which is really kind of jagged and syncopated, which is really nice. I love, too, the way that the drums come in. Guy Evans is playing what you think is the upbeat, but then it turns to be the downbeat, so there's a weird kind of switch around once the song kind of gets going. Which is cool. And I mean, it is in essence, a kind of a straight-ahead pop song, really, with that rock sort of edge. I like the contrast between the acoustic guitar in the intro and then the heavier electric guitar that comes through in the chorus. The da-na-na-da-da-na-na-na. Very simple, but very effective. And lyrically, there's a real change in tone as well. Lines you were talking about, late for breakfast, black coffee, brandy-laced. Seems to me to be a different lyrical approach. I guess you could trace it to Quiet Zone, Pleasure Dome, but it's a different take on things, which is really good. We like things fresh, don't we? So that brings us on to track 3 of side 1, Philia. This is the first of the real PH classics, I think. Just a sweet, tender, pastoral acoustic song. I guess you'd call it a ballad, something of a love song. But it's very tranquil, and some nice synthesizer tones that are added towards the end, and it's just a really good song. Again, it's been performed many, many times since this album was released, and in a lot of ways, it's kind of the last, sort of raw acoustic song that Hammill would do for many, many years. Because, of course, after this, we have the K Group, full rock band, and then after that, we get into the computer era in the late 80s, so there wasn't quite so much room for a nice little acoustic guitar song for quite some time, so it's kind of the last one we hear for a while, but terrific song, and again, highly recommended. One of the true classics on here, I think. Moving on to track 4, we get Empress's Clothes. This is one of the more experimental tracks. While I did say that this album does sort of, rein things in and simplify things a bit, there's still lots of room for experimentation. And Empress's Clothes does kind of hark back to some of the weirder songs on PH7 of the future now. It's got that drum machine as the main part of the rhythm section, and a very uneasy bass line. Like, the bass line itself is unsure what direction it's going to be going. And just a great track for sure. There's certain parts that I really enjoy, like the ascending vocal bit where we get one Peter Hammill over here and then a Hammill in the middle, a Hammill over there. It's kind of an interesting production technique there. But really good song. A great sense of uncertainty, which is again a common theme in his Over. Don't think I pronounced that right, but oh well. Anyway, moving on, we get another experimental track for track 5, Glue. Now this one is one of my favorites on the album, actually. This is a really good song. I think the sound of the music goes really well with the the lyrics. There's almost kind of an oppressive tone to it, very uneasy, very creepy. And the song is essentially built up on a few loops of bass, and we get that cool riff. And I think there's multiple takes kind of thrown on top of each other to get a real claustrophobic feel. And the way that those the piano chords come in to kind of form the basis of the song itself is very jarring and uneasy, and it goes so well with the lyrics. Just a terrific song. Yeah, well, you just gotta check that one out. Really, really good. And again, proof that the experimentation was still present at this time, but it's much more refined. I think the experimental stuff is more subtle this time around, but still very successful. Very well done. We move on to track 6 of the album, Hesitation. This is similar to My Experience, I think, and that it is more of just a straight-ahead rock song. Not quite as good as My Experience or some of the other rockier tunes on the album, but it's a great track for sure. I like how we've got like the slow sections and the fast sections, which is really, really nice. I particularly enjoy his vocal performance on this take as well. I like especially the very first bit. This is no time. The way that line is delivered is just fantastic. It almost reminds me of earlier Vandergraaf stuff, but it's not. It's definitely a totally different thing. More of a straight ahead song in that regard. I love how it goes into the falsetto for certain parts of for certain lines of the song. That's really cool. A good track, but not one of the better ones. However, we then flip the album over, and we get Side 2. Now, Side 2, there's 5 songs on it, and 4 of them are all, essential Peter Hammill songs, in my opinion. Such a high concentration of very, very good material on the second side. The first 3 songs in particular are all, they're 3 of my favorite Hammill songs, so that's saying something. It opens, the second side opens with the title track, Sitting Targets. Now, this to me is just a perfect song. It is so well put together. I mean, it's a tight arrangement. There's nothing superfluous about it. It's just, it says everything that it needs to say in one go. I love the lyrics, the imagery of, being in the car, and it's really good. I love the music too. I love the intro, the acoustic guitar, boom, the way that goes against the rhythm section, and it's kind of a fast shuffle, and it's really something special. I remember when I first heard this album and I was collecting them all in order, I thought, wow, I mean, with the title track, Sitting Targets, he's come across something, that's a really, really good thing. I love the bridge as well. I like how the whole thing kind of stops after that, in the car, and slow build up. The live versions, as performed by the K Group, are stellar as well when you get to that bridge section. I love the way that the end is arranged as well, how the way it repeats the chorus, sitting, it's not too far to drive, Sitting Targets comes right back at you. It's really, really cool. What's also interesting about Sitting Targets, although it was clearly written to be a band piece, like a rock kind of a song, it works really well as just a solo acoustic piece as well. And again, another reason that he's performed it live so many times, in the context of a band, as well as just solo acoustic guitar and voice. It works really well both ways. So yeah, one of my favorite Peter Hammill songs. Again, a classic piece. You must hear Sitting Targets. Really, really cool. Then we move on to track 2 of side 2. We got another absolute out-and-out classic, Stranger Still. This is very much in the vein of the sort of classic Peter Hammill piano song. Wouldn't really call it a ballad, but it is very reflective and very nostalgic, I think. I really enjoy the lyrics too. I love the imagery, eating a good meal by myself and toasting the empty glass. I'm not sure what it is about it, but it's just fantastic. And of course the big line, if I've become a man of the world somehow, that's not necessarily to say I'm a worldly man. I'm not sure what's profound about it, but there's a profoundness to it, especially coming from Mr. Hamill's voice. What else is notable about Stranger Still that I really, really like is it's a great combination of the traditional Peter Hammill piano song, but there's also lots of room for the experimentation. So we can see elements of Future Now, PH7 coming in very, very nicely with more traditional stuff. And I'm speaking particularly of the outro of the song, where the whole thing sort of falls apart in this kind of myriad of vocals and synthesizers, and it works really well with the main refrain of the song as well. Obviously, that is nothing can be less strange in entropy, and the way that the song kind of slowly falls apart into chaos at the end perfectly represents entropy. So it's really well put together, and I love the way that the vocals all work towards the end is cool, and the synthesizer line and the bass line at the end is really neat. It's just a perfect song. And also, what's notable, of course, is the live performances of Stranger Still. The end is always a little bit different. It's never quite the same, and I mean, really, when it comes to Hammill's live performance, the end of the song is going to depend entirely on how he's feeling in the moment of that performance. Which it's kind of proof that when Hammill plays live, I mean, the songs are living, breathing, sort of mutating forms, in his own words. And Stranger Still is a great example of that. There's a wonderful live album. I don't believe the full version is available. The Piano Guitar Vox box, which is a fantastic live box. I think there's 3, maybe 4 versions of Stranger Still on that, and every ending is totally different. So another reason why it's really cool. Classic song. Moving on to track 3 of side 2, we have Sign, and yet another absolute out-and-out Peter Hammill classic. I love Sign. It's one of the first songs I heard from this album, actually. I saw on YouTube a rendition of the K Group performing it, and the versions of Sign that the K Group did are just absolutely stellar. But we'll talk about that more later in a different video. The original version of Sign is still great. A little more rigid, the way that the guitar is strummed. It's a bit stiffer, but it doesn't detract from the song whatsoever. Things that I particularly like about that, I like about the studio version, I should say, is when we get to the chorus and throw the picture away, and he holds that note and he kind of does some cool melodic things with it. It's really cool. I also like the ooh-hoos that come up through the studio version. It's just a great track. I've got absolutely no idea what it could be about lyrically. Again, I'm not much of an authority to analyze the lyrics too much, but whatever the lyrics mean, they work really well. Sign the picture and throw it away. I don't know if that's a reference to fans, or if it's I've got no idea. But yeah, it's a classic for sure, and better versions live coming up with the K Group. Anyway, moving on, we get track 4 of side 2, and if there is a weak link on the album, this one is it. What I did is the 4th song on side 2. It's a good song, don't get me wrong. I mean, I certainly don't dislike it, but at least on side 2, it is the weaker track, and I think overall on the album, it's probably the weaker one. And that's interesting for me to say, because I typically like the more experimental, raw noise tracks, and what I did very much is that. Lots of weird, gurgling synthesizer sounds, and kind of backwards drum sounds as well, so it's got an unusual sound palette to it for sure. But for whatever reason, it never quite did it for me. I think part of it might be it's a very repetitive song. That refrain, I must have been crazy. That is in the song a lot, perhaps a little bit too much, but it's still a good song. Like I said, I don't dislike it by any means, but it's just not quite the top thing on the album. Would have sounded very modern in its day, I guess, in 1981. I would imagine that sounded pretty contemporary, which is good. That's what we want, right? Anyway, we finally make it to the final track on the album, Central Hotel. And this is another Peter Hammill classic, in my opinion. I really like this track. It's almost like the closest you'll get to Peter Hammill doing blues, I think. It's kind of like a heavy bluesy piece. There might be a little bit of thread of continuity between this one and, say, Ship of Fools from Vital. But it is very much its own thing, and yeah, it's just a great track, a great riffy track. I love that boom, nice and slow, and it's it commands your attention. The intro is very weird as well. There's some odd timings that are happening on the intro before it kind of settles into its its proper pattern, if you like. Great bridge to it as well. I like the kind of little synthesizers that come in there for the I Can't Help It section. And yeah, just a great song. I love some of the lyrics too. I search for rhythm and I find that I haven't one. Then we got the 2 vocal takes that go over top of that. That's really cool. if there is one criticism I have of the studio version of this, is that the very end of the song cuts out really, really quickly. The live versions of Central Hotel, we hear that final riff quite a bit more, that and in the studio version it fades almost immediately. You hear the bass line do it for a little bit, and then it just kind of like gets sucked out of the mix quite rapidly. And I'm not sure if that had to do with time constraints, the physical restraints of, constraints of working with vinyl. I'm not sure why that is, but it's how the original version is, and the original version is still great. I'm not knocking it, but if it was up to me, I would have had just a few more seconds of that last riff. I like how it does close with Morra Spurts percussion as well, which is quite cool. Morra Spurt is also on Empress's Clothes. I forgot to mention that when I talked about that. But yeah, Central Hotel wraps the album up in a very different fashion from the previous album. Obviously, A Black Box finishes with the big 20-minute epic, and this finishes with a blues song, but it wraps the album up really, really nicely, and, like I said, this is a seminal moment in Hammill's career, I think. Black Box is closer to kind of my preference, my personal favorite, but objectively, this has got to be one of his best, I think, in my opinion. Well, objectively, in my opinion, that doesn't make any sense at all now, does it? But, and I hate talking about, top 5, top 3, it's futile to try and organize your favorite music into a category of some kind, but surely this is in the top 3 of his greatest overall works. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. So anyway, that concludes this video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe and all that fun stuff. I don't want to fall off my chair. And yeah, stay tuned for the next video, which of course we'll be talking about the K group finally. So yeah, stay tuned. Thank you very much, and stay tuned for more. Take care.